Good day, everyone. BOMA Greater Dallas is pleased to present this webinar, Measures to Consider During Quarantine and Re-Entry, Ask Our Janitorial and Restoration Experts. We welcome all of you to the program. My name is Jacqueline Bird, BOMA Greater Dallas's Secretary-Treasurer, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. Please note that today's call is being recorded. All participants will be muted during the broadcast. However, you can enter a question for us in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen at any time during today's webinar. We will address those questions at the end of the presentation. If you're listening to the audio only and do not have access to the chat box, you may email your questions to Colleen Bransford at cbransford@bomadallas.org, and we will address your questions after the broadcast. As we get started, I would like to thank our BOMA Greater Dallas Foundation partners for their support. 5, ABM, Empire Roofing, Facilities Solutions Group, Night Restoration Services, Select Commercial Services, Sun Commercial Roofs, and United Protective Services. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers for today's panel. Andy Mock from ABM, Charles Hart with Select Commercial Services, Edward Mills of Interstate Restoration, John Lyons with Night Restoration, Casey Chappell with Blackman Mooring and BMS CAT, and Wesley Hayes of America's Corporate Building Maintenance. While we may cover legal issues, this is not legal advice. Further, due to the rapidly changing nature of the law and the COVID-19 crisis, we recommend you consult with your legal counsel on this issue before you implement or change any policies or procedures. During today's webinar, we will answer questions submitted during the online registration. We had a large number of questions submitted, so we apologize if we're not able to get to yours. But now, on to the questions. Good morning, everyone, or good day, everyone. How are you?
Good morning.
Well, thank you.
Afternoon.
Great. Good morning, or good afternoon.
We are so glad to have you guys with us today and are looking forward to the discussion. Starting right off the bat, one of the questions that we wanted to hear from you on is, especially those of you that are in janitorial, are you seeing a lot of companies cutting back on their janitorial staff during this time?
I'll start off and answer that one. Majority of our clients are keeping their buildings going, maintaining all the essential services inside and outside of the buildings. We have very few clients, maybe 10% or less, that have reduced square footage or actually, from a night cleaning standpoint, has removed the cleaners altogether, just leaving the day staff. So that's kind of what we're seeing. Now, as we anticipate re-entry and re-occupancy, we've been asked to put together plans to plan for that. So what you're going to see is some of the buildings that may have removed square footages or have kept it from nightly cleaning at all may see a little bit of interruption in services as we try to regain the crew to clean that office building. But the majority of the clients in the office buildings that I've seen, that I've talked to, are maintaining those nightly crews so that there is no interruption of service and they're ready to go when reoccupancy starts.
I guess just to add to that, we're seeing an industry variance based on the type of client. For those industries that are heavily dependent on foot traffic, in-person sales, entertainment venues, businesses that have kind of shut down their doors, we've seen a complete reduction of janitorial staffing until they reopen. But for essential businesses like healthcare facilities, we've actually seen no reduction at all. In fact, we've seen some increases in janitorial scope due to the high need to keep certain places clean and sanitized. So some of the more heavily burdened facilities are investing in more germicidal and virucidal services.
Interesting.
And just to add to all that, basically, one thing to keep in mind is when you're reducing your staff, you also run the risk of losing team members that aren't going to return. So you also are looking at the possibility of having to hire a new team, retrain them, and really start over again. So we always try to emphasize like enhanced cleaning measures, the increased frequency of cleaning, things to keep in mind as things start ramping up.
That's good. That's good.
Well said, Andy.
One of the questions we had is about when the quarantine is over. And the question is basically, should there be any new protocols regarding cleaning? We all know that we're going to be in a different time once we get past where we are. And so will there be any new protocols that you recommend?
Yeah, I think that some protocols should be in place. And of course, it depends on the scope of services, depending upon the building. But we've implemented using biorecidal and germicidal, certain germicidals for a multi-surface cleaner and cleaning high-touch areas. So people or places that people are more likely to touch, sit down, and interface with have become a high, point of emphasis. And so we've hired, one person or two people to their sole purpose is just to clean high-touch areas.
Interesting.
I think going along with that, yes, I think there will be a new protocol. I think the managers and building owners really need to focus on their high touch points on the common spaces, the elevators, the bathrooms, cafeterias, the spaces that people convene really should be your focus. I think you might want to let the tenants kind of decide what to do in their space, but as far as y'all's spaces, I would definitely recommend some high touch point and common area cleaning at some point with that goes above and beyond what you're doing.
And then also probably you're going to need to start to steer away from all purpose cleaners to EPA registered disinfectants. That's going to be a common theme. So that's something you need to have in the back of your mind when you're starting to order supplies. So just keep that in mind as things start to ramp up again.
Now, why the switch from all purpose?
With registered EPA products, you're disinfecting, which means you're killing the germ completely. There's some products out there that might remove or decrease the amount of germs, but using a registered disinfectant completely kills the germ, the virus, from that surface level.
Okay.
I was going to say you can on the website it has the kill times. The EPA has kill times for the chemicals. So some have 10, 5, and some are in between. So you can look at the EPA kill list online, and if we can provide that afterwards. So you can kind of choose which chemical is available and I think it's best for your building.
Yeah.
The best part about that is after those times have gone down, the dwell times, if you will, you can return right back to those spaces. You don't have to wait longer than that to get back into those spaces. So it's not a long time at all to be out.
Absolutely.
The dwell times need to take into consideration of additional costs, from chemical costs to the dwell time in between when you apply the disinfectant, to the additional labor and time that it takes to go back and wipe it down, allowing it to kill the virus or any pathogen.
Well, and while we're talking about just the cleaning treatments, what about the effectiveness of spray sanitation treatments like Clorox 360? And what's the standard of practice for those treatments in buildings?
Yeah, you can go, John.
John?
Yeah, I was going to say it's kind of a two-part answer because are they effective? Yes, but there's a big caveat to that. They're effective if, and I'd say there's probably 3 things that need to go along with that. One is the correct chemical, like these gentlemen have said kind of throughout this, is it Clorox 360 is one, but there's also kind of 100 other chemicals that are approved and on the CDC list. So one would be make sure it's on there. 2 is the application. Is it applied correctly? Like they mentioned before, chemical, but you don't apply it correctly. You spray it and wipe it and don't give it the proper dwell time. It's no longer. And then that last piece would be that you have a clear process for how you do apply it. So are you, do you have a team that's wearing the right PPE? Do you have a team that is going through, are they just spraying it in the air, or are they actually applying it correctly to surfaces? Those type of things you need to consider. And so really, for it to be effective, you just have to have a team that you trust that applies the chemical correctly, has the right process, and has a proactive plan for how they're going to do that.
Thank you. Edward?
Yeah, I would say that it is very effective. We've been doing some weekly cleanings in places that have to stay open 24/7 because of the nature of their job, with high people turnover every 12 hours and things of that nature. We've been coming in and doing the fogging and wipe down, and have been very successful at not having any cases continue or come back if there was one. So yes, the spray application is very, very effective if, like John said, it's done properly by a trained staff. So.
And then also, if you have a confirmed case, standard practice usually asks that you wait 24 to 48 hours after, if it's a confirmed case, before you're allowed to come back in, just from a health risk. So sometimes if people are trying to rush and get it clean, just know that some policies are that you have to wait 24 to 48 hours before going in and cleaning.
Interesting.
And also to add to that, another thing to look at is the lifespan that the virus can last on an inanimate object. Recent studies showed that it can last up to 9 days, but the median time was 5 or less. So if you have confirmed cases, this is definitely something to consider, either on a weekly basis or depending upon your foot traffic.
It's interesting that you say that, because one thing that came to mind as you guys were talking is during the daytime, it may be a little easier to keep the building clean while fewer people are in the building, but during the daytime when buildings open up again, what frequency should we be hitting those common areas?
Right now, we have our day boarders on an hourly schedule that are cleaning the common areas, bathrooms, elevators. We kind of have them on a routine, they just cycle through these areas. We don't have every building staff.
As far as wipe down go, you can do that on any schedule. As far as the spray application, that should really be done after hours. There shouldn't be anyone in the spaces that are doing it. I mean, we use a very low, the toxicity level of our chemical is very low. So that's also something you want to consider when picking a company or a customer or product, is making sure that the toxicity level is low, so then people don't come in with scratchy eyes or throat and think that they have COVID, but it's really just a reaction to the chemical. So you don't want to create that problem either. So I'd definitely pay attention to the toxicity level. But if you're fogging, you don't want anyone in the space, so it's definitely an after hours activity.
Well,
go ahead.
As it just pertains to the day staff, we use a product called Alpha HP. The main ingredient is hydrogen peroxide. It's on the EPA kill list of about 5 minutes, I believe. It has a low toxicity level, and it is harmless to humans. So that's just one of the examples during the day that we, a product that we use that's not harmful and kind of help mitigate the spread in these high touch areas that are being used throughout the day.
One thing to consider with that too is to make sure that when you're using a hydrogen peroxide, you got to be aware of the surface that you're using it on.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Casey, I wanted to ask you, being with Blackman Mooring, are you using these similar products, or are there other products that you're aware of?
Yeah, yes, there's other products, and I think each really needs a thorough assessment. Like, is this going to be sprayed on fabric? I think we all have to assess the space individually and kind of frame up the plan from there. And then there's two things we're really thinking about. One is a practical cleaning, and then the other side is the optical for all the tenants, so that they start to feel comfortable with all the extra measures that we're taking into place. So we're also considering keeping up with our property managers and making sure that they are able to send out those messages to their tenants so they feel more comfortable in this.
As we talk about maintaining the buildings, of course, the safety of personnel is important too. So while we're trying to keep up with maintaining the buildings, what should we be doing to try to keep our teams safe, our property management teams, our day staff, our night staff teams?
So I'll take that one. Obviously, there's somewhat of a new normal when it comes to keeping everybody in the building safe, whether it's visitors or the occupants or people that are there 24/7, for instance, like the cleaning from a day to night standpoint. But it requires a whole lot of additional training, follow up, accountability. You've got to be able to provide the right amount of PPE, whether it's, a mask that can be washed and disinfected and brought back, or one that's disposable, to the gloves, to making sure that the disinfectant is there. Also, if you do have an instance with a confirmed case, making sure that you have the right Tyvek suits on hand and that everybody's trained on how to dispose of those, because, now technically that's a biohazard or disposable. So you'll want to make sure that all that's in place and that you've communicated with your tenants, that you've taken these steps, and our current partners have all these things in place, from training to safety, to keep the frontline individuals safe. Will keep everyone else safe in the process as well.
Jackson, I think one of the big things is just to, it's going to be a term you probably hear throughout this conversation, is just to be more proactive instead of reactive. I think the more that you can do that, whether that's, like they've talked about, having a day porter that is just in your lobbies and your elevator areas, that goes and touches and cleans all high touch points all day. Going that route and thinking through and putting a plan together with your teams on how to be more proactive. Because otherwise, if we're just sitting around waiting on a case or waiting on an outbreak, that type of reactiveness is we're not protecting or serving our tenants very well at all if we do that. And so really just think proactive, and how can I do that well? And what's a plan that allows me to do that?
And I'm sure everybody's familiar with all the recommendations about protecting yourself and washing your hands. But the CDC also recommends, if you can provide products, to provide masks and hand hygiene products at all ports of entry to the building. If you have that kind of access to either gloves or masks, one way to ensure that it's not going to spread is to provide it to the people that are coming in the building.
And then when you're also talking about like frontline health and safety, proactive, usually, yes, they're wearing face masks, they're practicing social distancing by working 6 feet apart. They're also carrying multiple gloves with them at all times. So whenever they're taking breaks, they remove the gloves, then they wash their hands. And then when they come back from break, from lunch, they start with a new pair of gloves. So those are just common sense, but those are big, important things to be proactive and just cover all areas, just to make sure your front line is safe and practicing good health.
Are you guys finding that that at times you're finding there's a shortage of PPE or even hand sanitizer? Is that going to be a concern when everyone starts coming back?
Absolutely. But it's important to have, and I'm sure everyone else can attest to this, multiple suppliers in different areas and different parts of the state and country, because you can't just rely on one supplier. And one way, if you have hand sanitizer shortage, you can get other off-brand hand sanitizer are available. So you can replace your Purell foam hand sanitizer with a generic one, and you'd be able to use a generic hand sanitizer once you're out, and kind of keep it going without running out.
Yeah, and Wesley, you're absolutely right. We call that having a lot of irons in the fire. You want to have as many supplier options as possible. But what we're seeing is multiple delays, promised delivery dates, and deliveries don't happen. So you've got to have a secondary and a third and a fourth. And so everybody needs to be prepared, if you're not, part of the medical profession, that you are going to see delays in PPE and disinfectant. And so, depending on how that particular company prepared for this, you may have extra inventory and you're trying to manage that well. But from a building standpoint, tenants are going to ask, are you going to be putting out hand sanitizer stations? So that's it, unless you currently have it and then have the refills, it's going to be difficult to get those in a timely manner when you start the reoccupancy. If it starts, in the middle of May, like we're all kind of anticipating. However, what you do want to make sure that you mention is that you have the antimicrobial soap. You're using disposable towels. There are things in the building, we've increased the high touch points for the disinfectant. So you may not have the hand sanitizer available. It's really encouraging individuals to continually wash their hands and make sure that they don't touch their face. And if they do touch a door handle, just making sure that that's very consistent, because the hand sanitizer is going to be an issue when the reoccupancy starts. It's just, that's part of our reality right now.
Right. And then when you're talking from a supply and demand, whenever things start ramping up, you're going to need to start going through your checklist, do a reopening strategy with your janitorial company. Just try to look at your inventory. What do you currently have? The one thing you want to do is not overreact and just buy 6 months worth of hand sanitizer all at once. That's where it's going to get really difficult when everybody overreacts. But to look at it and look at your inventory and effectively order what you need. And also right now, if as cities are starting to reopen, right now is the time to start ordering your supplies and get that under back order so that you can be proactive. You could be on the front line to get these things whenever tenants start to come, because they're going to start asking. And that's one of the tenants' big things are, what proactive measures are you putting in place so that my employees feel safe? Even though that there might be a shortage, ordering now is the time to do it. So do with your janitorial company and who they're providing, and just make sure they're on the forefront of that.
Also, and just to end on the note, one of the things of the janitorials that we do is we are changing out our equipment, because there are no shortages of mops or towels or the kinds of equipment that are readily available. And so we have it on the schedule to change out our equipment so that when we use it, it's not old and dirty, but it's new, and we're able to clean more effectively.
Does anyone else have anything to add?
No, I think that really just, I mean, when it comes to that, you know, right now that there's going to be a shortage, it's going to be harder to get. And so it really does lean on going back to what they've said about being proactive and having a plan in 4 other ways that you're going to be able to protect and serve your tenants and your building without hand sanitizer. That can't be the sole thing that you do, that the protect thing, because you know already that it's going to be a shortage. So that again goes back to having a plan and walking through with your teams on, okay, we don't have this, great. What are the other things that we can do that really help serve our tenants the best?
Yes. You know, as we talk about just general cleaning, there's some specific areas that most times need extra cleaning anyway, like our fitness centers and coffee stations. Is there anything specific that we should be looking at as it pertains to those spaces?
Yeah, I'll take that one. I think there should be. It just depends on if you want to open it, and if you want to open your gym. If you do, you might want to have a certain time that it's open, not all the time. You might want to limit the type of people or the number of people that can go in at one time. Schedule, daily wipe downs of that equipment. But it all comes back to your plan of attack, making sure you are partnering with someone that understands the situation, and getting your building the best overall place that it can be with this moving target. This is going to be a moving target when we come back. Things are going to change. And you want to be able to adapt that plan. So getting together with your staff, getting a hygienist involved if you need to make sure that you are touching everything that they could see on that plan would be my strategy moving forward.
Absolutely. It's either if you open up your amenity areas or not. If you don't, then you don't really run that risk. If you do, you need to put into places the things that Albert talked about, and have a plan to address people constantly touching that area, whether it be a day porter or someone from your own staff monitoring that area and constantly cleaning it.
Then also, just from a scope level, that scope is a starting point for your building. And that was all pre-COVID-19. So with increased frequency of cleanings, implementing an enhanced cleaning program, doing things that would have done just on a bi-monthly, but doing it monthly or quarterly, it's just been a game changer. So you're going to have to reassess the scope, look to improve it. It's not wiping the scope out, it's just increasing it and implementing procedures to further provide just a comfort level for your building, your tenants, and just being proactive.
Yeah, and another thing I would say is you really want to get with your tenants and your tenant contacts to figure out when they're coming back to work, what their actual plan is. If they have, so then you can better utilize, how many people are actually going to be coming in the building, and maybe that have used that space in the past. So if you need to reach out to your tenant contacts, get an idea of what they are going to try to do in their spaces, when they're going to try to come back to work. So then you can manage. Maybe you might have to schedule times where certain floors can come into the building. 8:30 to 9 is for this to that. So you maintain your distances in the elevator lobbies and in the elevator. So not everyone's just queued up in the elevator. You might have to stagger your time of tenants returning and leaving the building at one time. So speaking with your tenants and getting an idea of what they're looking at and how many people they're trying to bring back would be very beneficial for you and your plan.
Good. Does anyone else have anything to add?
I think just common sense. I'm sure that most of y'all are thinking through how do we just lessen touch points? Is there a door that we just leave open? One of the things that's kind of helped us in going through this time is that we do so much in the healthcare side, and I think a lot of those practices are just going to be brought in more so on the office side. And so if we can lessen touch points by leaving open a door and maybe closing the coffee station and thinking of other options and thinking through even deliveries. How are we going to manage the deliveries coming in? Because the reality is, even if we completely sanitize a space, that space, as y'all know, can be recontaminated immediately by a human that is unknowingly infected. So we just have to think about those things going forward without giving ourselves OCD, just doing what we can to lessen those touch points.
I would imagine that each of your companies has been engaged somehow in a space that either had a confirmed case or suspected case. And since then, what are you seeing as best practices that should carry forward along the lines of what you were saying, Casey, of leaving doors open? Are there any other things that you've seen as best practices?
Are you talking about like for a confirmed case with how to clean a building after a confirmed case? Is that the question?
Well, let's ask the question: Have you had to be engaged in a cleanup, and what was that like? And then
Yes, a few times, and it's a wipe down, a fog and a wipe down is really what it is. It's detailed hand touch point cleanings of all the high touched areas with the application of a fog chemical, and then another wipe down of that fog chemical again. And we have successfully, of all the floors and buildings we've treated, have not had any cases afterwards. So we feel confident in our protocol and our steps.
And I think that,
Go ahead, John.
Go ahead, Don.
Sorry, every building, every tenant is unique, right? Because it could be an office building, it could be multi-floor tenant, it could be, we've seen industrial that we've been cleaning, we've seen production lines that we've been that have had cases on there. And so it really is about finding out what's unique to that tenant and that space, and then working through an actual plan to disinfect that. And having the systems and the process in place, whether that's ozoning the space, then coming along after that, fog, wipe down, whatever that looks like. But it's really about understanding the space you're working in and what was the affected level, how many people were affected, is it just one person, do they travel all over the office, or do they have one office in the corner? I think you've got to answer a lot of questions, and that's where it really is a partnership, not just going in and bombing a space, being done and coming out, but it's really understanding how to attack that space correctly and then doing it to the best way to serve that client. And then there's from a building standpoint, and then the portering service that we've talked about, and having someone who can really wipe down high touch points and those high traffic areas is really important. We've seen a couple instances even on construction sites where they've had 7 to 10 outbreaks on their construction site They brought us in, and just by having a porter who does nothing all day long, going and wiping down all of those areas, they went from larger outbreaks to 0 outbreaks ever since we've had that in place. And so again, that proactive approach really is effective.
Thank you.
I want to address your question from the beginning, not when. So more from the property management standpoint, they really need to set the expectation for the staff and the tenants in the building safety with their tenant contacts, that if a confirmed case does come through, that they need to make sure that they communicate to the rest of the tenant base and the other vendors / contractors that enter the building to make them aware that they've had a confirmed case and what the plan is to move forward. The minute you don't talk about the confirmed case, everyone else's safety is put at risk. So the first and foremost is everybody in the building making sure their safety, because eventually you're going to have a confirmed case. We've had several confirmed cases, not within our staff, but within buildings that we clean. And first and foremost is the safety of our staff and then the building occupants. So, really you need to communicate with your tenant contact stating, if you've had this or you have a presumptive case, we need to communicate, keep everyone's identity and the tenant's identity safe, but or private. But really, you need to make sure that the entire occupant level of the building is well aware of the case and that you're taking the proper measures to have it disinfected from the traffic path of the individual that was the confirmed case to inside the space. So you really need to make sure that you set that expectation when the reoccupancy starts, because you will eventually have a confirmed case.
Yeah, and just to add to that, you can do everything you can from a cleaning standpoint, but when it comes to PPE, try to use all the resources available to you. Go out and talk to your vendors. I mean, we have suppliers all over from our networks, and reach out to us and see if we can help provide you guys with some gloves or some masks. Don't hesitate to do that, because we have potential resources that may be able to help you in some areas that you don't have.
Just having some transparency with everybody, make sure everybody's all on the same page, communicating, updating SOPs to make sure that y'all have the instructions in place, ready to go when events like these are happening. That's kind of where we are right now, is going back to the checklist, return to work strategy. While time is still on our side, we need to implement these things. Just transparency and making sure communicate effectively to everybody through the management team, your vendors, through your tenants.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on that?
I would just mandate that your vendor should go through a certain training and make sure that they understand the policies and procedures of the CDC, of the World Health Organization, and all those recommendations.
Have any of you done any specific training or specific discussions with property management personnel as it pertains to the CDC and the World Health Organization? Because we look to you guys as you're on the front line, and so we look to you to know a lot of details about what the requirements are, what the recommendations are.
There really isn't any exact training that someone can do for this. The closest anyone's come up with and that they recommend is bloodborne pathogen training, which our whole staff has taken and passed, and just being able to don PPE properly and the correct way to get out of that through the bloodborne pathogen training is what they have found. But as far as COVID-19 staff training, that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Well, I agree with Edward. There's nothing that's specific to this. It's just so new that there is no back file they had somewhere of how to train. And so there's the one that you spoke about, and then we're HAZWOPER certified.
Right.
Guys have been through that training with biohazard and things like that, and that with past viruses, the experience of training that comes with cleaning those. While this is different, it's just there are certain protocols you can put in place.
And I'm thinking,
if you give your staff PPE and don't do the HAZWOPER training or train them on how to wear it, there's no point in doing it, because they won't be safe and they won't be certified, and it won't do well for you. So make sure that the company and the people that you're asking to do that do have those certifications.
Yes, yes. And I was really thinking more on the lines of new products to use and that kind of thing, that you're talking closely with the management team.
That just goes along with I would just, there's BOMA is great at having these vendors and partnering. So I would definitely reach out to somebody. You're not in this alone. Please reach out to anybody and make sure that you have someone that has all these answers for you. And I think people on this call do have those, and the staff and the chemicals and the products to help you. You don't have them, you don't have access to all of those things, and you're not supposed to. That's what we're here to do, and we're here to help you. So I would just find a partner in this, no matter who it is, and lean on them and use this organization to do that, because most of these questions and answers you're not going to have, but we do. So please reach out and partner with somebody.
So catch the tail end of that, going back to what Casey was saying about making sure that you have an understanding of who else entering the building from a delivery standpoint. So, Edward mentioned this as well. From a property management standpoint, you're going to be taking care of the common area. That's what you're responsible for. But what the tenants are responsible for, their individual tenant spaces. And so they may go out and find their own sources or contractors to do work in their space. You really need to know who that is, what the kind of people they're bringing in, what kind of chemicals, what kind of equipment that they're bringing into the space, because everyone's going to be somewhat in a rush to kind of make sure that their space is a safe and healthy workplace for their employees to return to. So that's something you need to be aware of communicating with your tenant contacts as well.
Absolutely, and just kind of
I also think if you go on to your vendor's website, more times than not, they have a dedicated COVID-19 section in their website that you can reference, and they upload their new information because everything's updating 24/7 as this evolves. So go to the website of your vendors, see if they have anything that's being posted daily. Because I can tell you, probably from a corporate standpoint, they're having direct access to people with some of these. Just with some of the experts that are on the forefront of this. So reference those, and then of course, always go to your local vendor to ask additional questions and how it relates to their business.
Yeah, this is new to everybody. This virus just came about, and so the CDC is coming out with new information and recommendations on what to use and how to use it. So it's important to just stick by those guidelines and make sure you're using infectious disease protocols when you're selecting your chemicals and your PPE as well.
Charles, you brought up something earlier that made me think. Tenants are going to look to the property management teams to make sure that the common areas are taken care of, but they're also going to lean on the property management teams to help them with their space. There will be some tenants, larger tenants, that'll find their own companies, but a lot of them will turn to property managers and say, hey, can the existing janitorial provider help us keep our space more safe? And how are you guys preparing for that?
So when this first started, we actually put together a pandemic response team, is what we called it. We didn't know what else to call it. We didn't want to call it the COVID-19 team because we hear that word almost 100 times a day. So just to go back to your question, we put protocols in place, but really it was surrounded around the safety of the individuals on the front lines. And then that just extended to the management teams and what maybe their protocols needed to be. So, from a contractor standpoint, you really want to make sure you are the ultimate resource to be an expert in your field when it comes to what you're responsible for in the building in this certain situation. Everybody's going to play a part and a role, and you just have to partner together to get that done.
Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would just say, pass along the information that you are being provided from your vendor of choice, whoever you decide to help clean your space, and tell them that that's who you would recommend using. That would always be the best case scenario if they would use the same company that you are. We've had it come both ways where property management staff has organized it for the tenant, and then they just said, or the tenant just reaches out to us individually, and then we always loop in, since we have a familiarity with that building anyway, we always loop in the management and engineering staff to let them know, and security staff to let them know where we're going to be and what we're going to do. So if you can point them in the same direction as you're going with that same company, it would ease the communication battle. But obviously for some of the after hours and extended cleaning, it'll be on the tenants, and that's just something that I would recommend voicing to your vendor so they can bill correctly and keep the proper measurements and scope to that space. So just communication with your local vendor would be the best approach.
Speaking of the tenant space, nobody knows how long this COVID-19 exposure is going to go on. Of course, we all know we have yet to have the cure for it. But do you think that just nightly cleaning and disinfecting inside the tenant space is going to become the norm regardless? Well, is that something that we need to be planning to include in our cleaning protocol from here forward?
It depends on what industry you're in, your budget, and your tenants. Every building is different. Every social interaction is different. If this is something that's in your budget and that's something that your tenants want, you want to instill confidence in your tenants being taken care of nightly, even though nightly may not be necessarily necessary, but to instill the confidence that you're doing something about this and for a response. I'd say absolutely, until we get something to stabilize this, because the virus is going to take its course no matter what. And so it's important that you get on the same page with your vendor, voice your concerns, talk to them, and be on the same page about the scope and your expectations for them to complete either nightly, weekly, or whatever your schedule wants.
I think you might run into the possibility of having to increase your daytime staff. If you're going to increase the frequency of areas like the bathrooms that would normally get hit 3 times a day, if you're using the same existing team that you have in place for the day porters, if they're having to go to the bathrooms, they're not going to be able to touch all the high touch points. So you're going to have to look at and reconfigure how the staff count is set up. But when you're doing enhanced cleaning measures or just increasing the frequency of certain areas, the day staff might be one of those areas you're going to need to look to increase.
I think we tend to be a prisoner of the moment. I don't know if this is going to be the going forward. I think we just need to take it as is. I don't think you need to jump straight ahead to we're going to have to do this for the rest of the building's life. I think we've had things like this come about, different type of diseases and different type of disasters, if you will, come through, and things have kind of not progressed how you thought in the moment. So I would just say stay calm, take it day by day, and just keep your head down and keep it clean, and see what comes out. But as far as planning on what's going to happen in a year or two, I don't think that we really know that.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, Ed. We can't really tell. That was a great point, man. But honestly, for the first month, when everything kind of returns back to normal and you're seeing the influx of people, that's when I would make that a priority for that first month in the immediate future. But just like Ed said, we can't tell the future. No one's going to know where we're going to be in a year from now. So I would plan for your response immediately after the quarantine is over. Make sure you're communicating with your vendors. Hey, the first month, the 2 months, and then after that month, looking at the data and going back and assessing and seeing where everything is, and then showing where you should go moving forward.
Yeah, that's good.
I'll second on that communication piece, not only for the vendor to be communicating with the property manager, but something that we've seen is that the property managers that are communicating with their tenants and kind of surveying them for what their expectations are will know that they're meeting or exceeding those expectations going forward. And so it's really helped us as a vendor to frame and strategize with our customers, our property managers, what is going to be the most successful, because part of this is practical and part of this is optical. We want our people to feel safe, and so we have to do a good job of communicating that with them.
Yeah, and I would just say that, again, just to keep calm, don't overreach your authority. Be practical about what you're deciding. You have strong, tenant versus building uh, responsibilities. Just keep that framework in mind. Don't feel like you need to overstep and jump into what's their business and what's your business. Just stay on course of what your normal responsibilities are, and let the tenants do what their normal responsibilities are, and don't try to force them to do something that might not fall into your responsibility. So that's all I would say.
So guys, I have just a few questions I want to pose to you, and we may have touched them, but if we have, just give us the specific answer for it. These came up in the Q&A. The first one says, can any of you recommend a disinfectant that can be used on high touch areas that won't wear on the metal finishes?
Yes, all the products that we use don't wear. They're low in toxicity. They're a greener type of product. So we have not had any type of wear on any of the products that we use.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, we use Alpha HP, Oxivir. TV is another good product that you can use. So those are the two main ones we've been using at our facilities.
And that was a great question because going back to one of our first statements, something that has the hydrogen peroxide, you gotta keep a close eye on which surfaces you're applying it to. Then there's several medical/hospital grade disinfectants that you can use. Virex 256 is one as well. But going back to Ed's comment as well, you've got to make sure that whatever chemical you're using does have a low toxicity rate.
Another question that we have is, do you have suggested cleaning scheduling for high point touch areas such as elevator buttons and doorknobs? I think you mentioned earlier.
There's several recommendations. It's really, you can customize that plan to however you want to do that from a daytime. And it also depends on how long the building is open and what kind of tenant base it is, how many visitors you have, is it a dense population, those kinds of things. We haven't really been seeing any type of dense populations in the office buildings right now, or facilities, but you can have an attendant, right, at every entry if you wanted, from the front door to the elevator, to each floor in the elevator, to the restroom. It really comes down to making sure that you're just disinfecting those throughout the day, that your tenants are seeing it, and that they're taking the proper precautions from their standpoint to make sure that they're washing their hands and they're using the hand sanitizer, and making sure that they're keeping social distancing as well. It's everyone's responsibility to make sure that happens. You want to set the base standard for that, and but I mean, the recommendation, you could do it at every entry point, at every person that enters the building if you wanted to. So.
And I think Casey actually touched on this when she said, a solution could possibly be keep some of your tenant doors open during the times people are coming in. You can get creative with it. There's not always just one solution. You can do that. You can have someone to give out gloves when people are walking into your facility. So, it just kind of depends on what is available to you and what you're able to strategize with your vendors.
I even think I saw an ad for antimicrobial elevator button covers. So there's all kinds of stuff out there. So
stuff you never knew existed.
I just think a lot of people are going to start observing more of the high traffic patterns and the occupancy levels of their building to make these type of decisions.
Yes. Another question I'd like to pose to you guys is, what is the best product to use on packages that are received?
Just any of the general germicidals. I think Charles said Virex. That's a good one. Packages, you don't really have to worry about the finish being messed up because it's packaging. So any of the virucidals we just mentioned would do fine on packaging.
It really goes back to the common sense, right? The CDC says you can use disinfecting wipes if you want. I remember when we first went to go get groceries, my wife wanted me to wipe down all the groceries. And, then we had touched them from the car. It's just, some of it's a little bit overkill. You really want to make sure that if you open up a package that's been delivered, open it, remove what's inside, and then go wash your hands. really what you're trying to do is control the spread of the virus, right? So that's really the common sense measures, and it's all over the CDC as to what to do with packages, to cleaning, disinfecting, to what you want to use. And I think everybody on this call is well versed in that. But it really comes down to making sure that everybody understands that if you come across something or you've touched something, you really just need to wash your hands again.
Let's see, I have another attendee that asked the question, what is the timeline for treatment of an area where there has been a confirmed case? So how quickly should we be getting to it?
Yeah, I think Andy may have alluded to this,
Right.
it's 24 hours.
24 hours.
And then if you go in with the electrostatic spray machine, if you're talking about that, if you apply that, you can go within that unoccupied space within 1 to 2 hours after it's been applied.
Right. Yeah.
And it just depends on how long it takes them to finish. The kill time for most of these virucidals is about 5 to 10 minutes. It's just if it's been a confirmed case in that tenant space, they're going to have to go in there and fog everything down first. And then that's why it will take about an hour or two to be ready to be back open.
When you're fogging the space, is there paperwork or anything like that the offices should be concerned about?
I mean, we always tell as much as you can, clear off as much desks as you can, put papers in your desk and clear off as much touch points and flat surfaces as possible. But, when we're cleaning, we typically don't touch papers unless we're told to, but they haven't had the product hasn't affected any of the paperwork or documents that are on people's desks. So because of the toxicity level is so low.
The great thing about the sprayers or the foggers is that it, surrounds everything. So from calculators to your computer screens without damaging electronics, copiers, those kinds of things. That's why that's so popular right now versus hand wiping down everything.
It's a mist. You can't see it. It's so fine. It's not like it's not like a fog where you can touch the water. You can't really do that.
It's also a good practice just to have people kind of clear their desks, every night anyway, as just a part of kind of procedure to get out. That way, if something did come up that they don't know about, that, they're able to go ahead and clear everything off. That's one of the things we've just been saying is, continue to have them clean it up. And then, hey, the tenant space looks a lot better.
Yeah.
That's a really good suggestion. Clean your desk every day. One other question that our participants, one of our participants asked is, has any of you used UV light to disinfect an office?
I've heard about it, but we haven't used it specifically because of the time, and we have to get our people, and have a process for that. But that's typically not for. I've not seen that used in the janitorial sector.
Okay.
That's definitely a longer term, more expensive capital approach, I think, for that. It's not, I don't know if you're just going to wave a wand over everyone that walks in the building or anything like that, but I know they can put it in the HVAC systems and things of that nature, but I think that's a lot more work. So no, we haven't used that.
Yeah. Well, we're coming to a wrap up, but I want to pose a question to each of you, for each of you to answer. In every situation, we try to find a positive way to view it, get a positive takeaway. So what do you see as a positive result from this pandemic?
I guess I'll go first. I've seen everybody bond together as a team, and every day has been a new day, from management teams to the vendors to the contractors. I've seen everybody come together, whether it's a competitor or it's somebody that you worked with for an extremely long time. We've all banded together and we've tried to make this work. And it's been nice to see everybody learn the lessons that they're going to learn, that are going to take them further, and that they've actually come together as a team to put together solutions for these.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this kind of highlights the effectiveness and the reason why BOMA is so special. You have a place where anybody can have a resource. We're all connected here, and everybody that's on this panel, everyone that's watching, you can use us and the people that are in BOMA as a resource. This is an invaluable resource. And so this kind of highlights how valuable BOMA is.
I think having an emphasis of health and wellness from everybody across the board, personally and professionally, having everybody and having like from our industry be an essential critical service line right now, and to be on that forefront of this as this continues to evolve. I think it's awesome to be a part of that and make sure that we could be the subject matter experts that people go to about this.
A big part. Go ahead, Edward.
You got it. You go.
I was just going to say, I mean, aside from business, I really think the positive takeaway is just kind of that human element, right? Like I just think about my neighborhood Facebook page. I mean, I'm seeing people who are at the store and they're going, "Hey, there's toilet paper here. Does anybody need any?" And you know, some people will pipe up and they go just drop it off at their door. Or they'll say, "Hey, I'm out of this at the house. Does anybody have this?" And they'll go, "Great, I'll leave it on my doorstep." And so just that human element to this, that the relationships that have kind of started to build and form, and I'm sure everybody on here could have those type of stories, that it allows us to just really take a step back and understand what's really important. The relationships, I mean, just the ability to, you know, have dinner at home with my family and just enjoy that time, or FaceTime with my parents. Just things like that the world shut down and made us stop, right? I mean, how many of us could say, man, I wanted to do that when I had time? Well, guess what? We all got time. And I think that's really the best part about this.
Yeah, I would second that for sure. I think there'd be a recheck of the work-life balance in people's lives. I think the reconfirmation of family is big. I think that I think even employers can figure out that people can work efficiently, surprisingly, from home. I think flexibility in people's work hours, I think will continue to be on the rise to allow people to you know, get the things they want done and kind of stagger people's hours and realize that they don't have to be in butts and seats don't actually mean much, that they can work from home. And I think people might realize that they can actually do things in less time and be able to spend more time at home. So I think that that's a positivity, and all that could lead to less traffic. So that could be a bonus.
That's a great point. Casey?
I have definitely seen what y'all have been saying, that increase in compassion and gratefulness and not taking things for granted. Like teachers, I don't think we'll ever take them for granted anymore. And then on the work side, it's just been a wonderful learning experience to watch everybody innovate and rise to the occasion daily. And so we're just blessed to be a part of it.
Yeah, those are great insights, guys. I want to just take a moment just to, as we wrap up, to thank everyone for joining us today, and to everyone who submitted questions. And I also want to thank our panel, Edward, Wesley, Charles, Andy, John, Casey. Thank you so much for your time and for your expertise that you shared with us today. And then we also want to give many thanks to our BOMA Foundation partners for their support. They are 5, ABM, Empire Roofing, Facilities Solutions Group, Night Restoration Services, Select Commercial Services, Sun Commercial Roofs, and United Protective Services. Finally, guys, we know there's still so much information that you need, so we'll continue to hold weekly webinars on topics related to COVID-19. Our next webinar is on Monday, April 27th, and we will cover the BOMA Greater Dallas Task Force on Reentry Draft Recommendations. Information for this webinar can be found on the BOMA Greater Dallas website under the event calendar. And with that, we want to thank you again, and to everyone, have a good day.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Be good. Be safe.